All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Reacher podcast. Today, we've got a huge treat. We've got CRO of MaryRuth's here. I'm sure there's no really need for an intro since everyone knows who you are. But before we dive in today, Jay, I'd love for you to kick it off. Maybe tell everyone a bit about who you are, what MaryRuth's does if they're not familiar already.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, brother. Happy to be here. Jay Hunter, Chief Revenue Officer at MaryRuth. MaryRuth, we're a vitamin supplement brand, really focused on vitamins for the whole family, really leaned in these days to sort of beauty from within, which I think is a great category. Um, I've been at the company a long time. I've got to do a lot of things, but I think the most fun things these days, Amazon, TikTok shops, all the different marketing stuff, meta influencers, all those types of things. I'm big on data, so I got a great analytics team at MaryRuth that I oversee. A lot of data visualization. I'm a big on the numbers guy. I do think the bigger you get, the more art it becomes. But I like to lean on the data too. So
I love that. Yeah, good data. Like that's what we love at the SaaS technology side too. So love to hear it. Honestly, what I'm curious about, before you became this big shot CRO of Mary Roots, like I'd love to hear more about your story, like what you were doing before, like who pulled you into the business, like, did you always have this like founder operator kind of like, or like a C-suite operator kind of mindset? Like walk me through what you were going through then.
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think definitely not. Like I didn't think I'd be here in C-suite. And it took a lot. Like I had to learn a lot. I had like a lot of great mentors and coaches along the way. I guess for me, started, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago now, like in the early days of Amazon. Me and my father actually, we had like a very small like reseller Amazon store, right? So like back then you could find brands like Lego or whoever that weren't on Amazon, buy their products wholesale, sell it on Amazon. It was a great business, went good, but like we could see the light that like that wasn't going to last. A lot of brands were going direct to Amazon, right? And that was going to be the future. So we sold that business. We felt like our strategy was pretty good. We started an Amazon advertising agency. So pretty much you're running ads on Amazon. We would help run it better, make it more optimized, and that went great as well. And one of our clients eventually became Mary Ruth. And I used to work very closely with Mary Ruth's husband, David. And David just called me one day like, hey, you want to come run my whole Amazon show? Uh, and so I did, and I've been at Mary Ruth. And so that's where I started, just Amazon. I always tell people like we grew up on Amazon. But these days, I get to do all the e-commerce. I get to help a lot with the retail. I get to do all the marketing. A lot of different stuff now. So,
That's awesome. So how many employees were at Mary Roots when you joined?
ooh, I'm early. I'm like under 10 employees when I started
Okay.
there. I think now it's at like 230 maybe.
Yeah.
I think on my team specifically, I got about 48. So the org got very big over time for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, your
But we
team's
grew.
yeah.
Sales are up. Things are growing. It's going great. Yeah, team's a lot bigger now though for sure.
Your team is bigger than Reacher. So it's a big team. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, I know the jobs to be done from like 0 to 10 employees are like completely different, right? I think a lot of people understand that you're overseeing all these marketplaces, you're putting the right team in place, right? You're helping make sure the company's on track. But when you just started on Amazon, right? What did like a typical week look like when you were there? Were you like wearing a lot of hats or
Yeah, I mean, you definitely wore a lot more. The smaller the team, the more hats you wear, right? So, like in the early days of Amazon, even though Amazon's like very, I would say a little bit of like an enclosed ecosystem. Like, we were setting up the listings. It was just like me and essentially two employees. We were setting up the listings. We were running the ads. We would figure out like how much inventory needs to get to Amazon, and then we would work with the warehouse to send that inventory. As it gets bigger, like you have a supply chain team. They get the inventory to Amazon. They figure out how much it needs. Right? You got to. Part of my org, I got the ad guys, then I got the merchandising team. Right? Like sort of start splitting roles up later, but in the early days, a little bit of everything. You had to build your own P&L. You had to send that over to the rest of the team for them to figure out. Yeah, it's like very, wear a lot of hats for sure.
it's interesting because like we chatted once at like I think it was the TikTok Shot Summit, right? And you told me you didn't have like a traditional background of like going to college, but I'm sure the rate of learning in this 0 to 10 period was incredibly high. And some of like the best Amazon sellers I've met didn't start off in college. Like they just sort of like jumped in and started learning everything, right? Like what did that learning process sort of look like? How did you do all these things at once and I guess survive,
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I just have a GED. Have never attended college a day in my life. Yeah, I mean, look, I think college is extremely helpful for plenty of people, but sometimes it's just like the experience of the job.
Yeah.
Even today, when I hire someone new, I only ever hire for two traits: it's hustle and grit, right? New stuff comes up every day, and you have to figure it out. And like that's the number one skill to possess, right? Like
Hmm.
might not be in your job description, you might not have never done it before, and you might have to learn something new. But like if you can and you're adaptable, like you're very valuable to any organization. And I think for us, I think at MaryRuth, like just a good culture of like when you're doing that and you're hustling and you're trying new things, like you got to let people know like it's okay if we don't do the best, right? Or we don't figure it out, or like we struggle along the way. Like it's okay as long as you don't give up. The most important thing is like you just keep pushing forward. I always say this, but Mike Tyson has a famous quote like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Like in ecom or just business in general, you get punched in the mouth all the time. You just got to be ready to
Yeah.
like, okay, now what? And as long as you're like that, you can persevere through anything, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, no, I agree because I'm in San Francisco, right? And Reacher just went through like Y Combinator, which is like an incredible accelerator for a bunch of these tech startups, right? And we meet all these like very intelligent, nerdy people, right? But I would argue, like you're saying, the ability to hustle and figure things out and determination in the long run is actually a better likelihood of company success than just raw intelligence because like nothing's worse than like a very smart person who's like lazy and thinks they're like entitled to it. You know what I mean? I
100%. Yeah.
and I'm curious, for people who are trying to assess for those qualities, especially for earlier hires coming in the business, right? If you're hiring, let's say you guys are at this like 10 to 30 employee stage, right? And you guys are hiring people early on that you want to invest in. How do you invest to find someone who, would have similar traits to you, like you did, right? For that grit and that hustle during the interview process.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think if it's a very senior role, like if it's a director or higher, I always give this advice to founders these days, but like you have to meet the person in person. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like today, where like everything's mostly virtual and at MaryRuth's like 100% remote company, I do think like for the hiring process, like you got to sit down, have dinner with someone, see if you like them, see if you're gonna feel good about being in the trenches with them, right? And then some of it's like, you just got to judge like, what you think their ability to hustle is, right? Like early days when they start, you should give them a job or a task that's not in their job description and see if their first thought is like, hey, this is not in my job description, I'm not going to do it. Or they figure it out and they're like, hey, I'm not really good at this, but I'll give it a try. Like just to see like what is their appetite to support the team when you're in the need, like I think stuff like that, like you really got to press. I also tell everyone like you should always do sort of like a 90-day trial period with any new employee just to make sure
Yep.
both sides feel like it's really going to be a good fit, right? You want them to be happy. You want to be happy. I think it is. I think it is very important for like the leaders of the business or that person's manager. Like they have to make sure you're providing people with like the right tools, resources, support, so that they can also be successful. I think too many managers are like, hey, I gave this person a job and they weren't great at it, but like, especially when you have like a new employee, you gotta like walk them through the motion, get them adapted to the culture. I think as a leader, like you got to take the first steps to try to help them be great. So
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to drill down into your first point, right? When you're saying you're sitting down having dinner with like a director hire, right? I know like probably at your stage and a lot of more senior leadership stage, you guys have honed your business acumen where you can feel it. But for those younger founders who are making senior hires, like, for us, I'm sitting down hiring heads of customer success with our co-founder, right? Who probably have like 5 to 6 more years of experience than I do.
yeah, for
But
sure.
when I'm sitting down with them at dinner, what sort of things should I be looking at? Is there any nonverbal cues they're giving off? Is there certain attitude things? Is there a certain amount of research they should do on me before they sit down? I'm just curious, like, what do you tend to look at or specific patterns?
I mean, I think a lot of it's old school, right? Like if you're gonna meet them for dinner or you're gonna have even a Zoom call with them, like, do they join the call first? Are they early? Like I'm a big like
Mm-hmm.
if I have an interview, I always join the call 5 minutes early. I just like to see if people beat me there, right? Because just like you want to know, like they're excited, they want to get into it. I do always like to test just like a little bit of their business knowledge. Like, do they know anything about the business? Do they have any questions about the business? I was always like to ask like, what do they think the biggest challenge is going to be that they're going to face? Um, I think a lot of it's very old school, right? Like, what are you going to do
Yeah.
when things get hard is like what you want to know from the person. And then you also want to know like how prepared they are because you can negate
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of luck or bad things happening, but just like being really prepared, like
Yeah.
and so I think those things still help me today. Again, like if I'm going to dinner, I always like to see if they get there before me, and that ideally I'm like, oh, this
Interesting.
person's like excited, they want to work with me, like this that
Yeah.
feels great. So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think I got there like 10 minutes before we had lunch too. So
no,
at
I
least
love it.
I passed a fake interview.
No, I love it. I
Um,
know. Then I'm like, okay, he was excited
yeah.
for lunch. Like that's what you want to know about people.
Yeah.
And look, people have things happen. Not every person makes it early. Maybe they running fast, but like, you want to know they're committed. Like even when I interview someone new, like, and they're about to get a role, like, nothing makes me more excited about a candidate than like, hey, they sent me a small email and it was like, hey, I really think I can make an impact on these areas, or hey, I was doing some early research and I saw like your emails are not so good, so I could help you. Like, I just love to see that early because then I just know they're motivated.
Do you still feel like you see that in like director or more senior level hires? Like, because for me, we had a candidate who reached out to me. He cold DM'd me a full Canva deck where he put together his own 30, 60, 90-day plan. He did an analysis on Reacher. He missed a few things in terms of like the ecosystem, but that's
Sure, yeah.
okay. But he mapped out like the ICP triggers and some of the value props of Reacher by scraping demo videos from our founders' LinkedIn's and then mine, and then looking at the website, and I was like, oh, this is like hustle and grit. But I feel like when I talk to sometimes head roles or senior roles, like sometimes you have to poach them. Sometimes it's hard for them to come to you with that level of excitement, right? Because everyone's coming to them with that. So I guess, are there other leading indicators that you're sort of looking at when you're hiring those people?
I mean, I think if it's someone that's like in high demand, usually for me, it's like I want to talk to somebody who would refer them, right? I do think like
Mm,
also as the team grows, like I'm big on like, hey, do you know anybody for this role we need? Would you bet your job on them? And
yeah.
if your answer is yes, then like and obviously like I don't mean that people want to lose their job, but like do you feel good about this hire like that you would stake your reputation on it? And if the answer is yes, then I'm a lot more interested in the candidate. I don't think anything beats it for me than referral
And a
by
good
someone that I
referral.
know is good, right? Like my good employees or like people that are good at other companies and they're like, oh yeah, my retail guy, he's so good, you should talk to him. I mean, stuff like that makes you feel great. And I do think that that's like a good early indicator. It's more like you finding that referral though versus them recommending it because everyone's going to give you their best referral. But like if you could just naturally like if you were looking for someone, Jay, hey, I need a new TikTok person, and you hit me up and I refer someone from my team, you would know like, oh, okay, Jay thinks this person's a killer, probably a killer, right? And I think like that's a great way to do it for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree, and I think the higher you go in your network, the better the quality of the referral gets. I am curious, right? Going back to earlier when you were saying willingness to go through the trenches together, right? Other aspects of grit for more senior hires. How do you go about asking those questions? And the reason I'm phrasing it like this specifically is I hear a lot of people on interviews, they ask leading closed-ended questions in a way where people are expecting an answer. Like some people will straight up ask like, are you able to push through when times get hard? Like they'll phrase questions like that, and that leads people to obviously say yes. And the more senior the candidate, the better they are at BSing. Do you use a combination of more like open-ended plus several closed-ended questions, or what's your sort of framework for assessing that specific characteristic?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think at this stage of my career, like a lot of it's gut. I always just like to
Yeah.
let the conversation flow naturally. I just ask them about their current business, right? Like what they currently do or the last role they had. Like, what'd you do there? Like, try to
Okay.
figure out like what are they most excited about? What did people think around them? What did they think of the business? Right? You want someone who like when they're talking about whatever they did last, whether it ended bad or not, is like not complaining that it was too hard or they couldn't do it, but more like, yeah, we did, we ran into this challenge, but this is how we solved it. Or like, yeah, we grew it by doing XYZ, right? Like you want someone who's like passionate about what they do, right? I think that's the thing.
Okay.
Like whether it's excited or passionate to work for you, or was at the last business they were at, or just about the work that they do, like I feel like you want like passion and excitement from someone where like, I want to be in tough times with this person, right? Like for me, that's always like the gut check I'm doing. Like times were really hard. Do I want to be like back to back with this person? The answer is yes. I usually lean in. But I mean, look, some
Yeah.
of it is you just got to try. I tell a lot of people like better to go a little bit fast than not at all. So like sometimes you don't know if you have the perfect candidate. You just got to throw them into the fire and figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, like, do you have any interviews where, I guess like it did result in a favorable outcome or hire that you could share without mentioning the person's name and kind of walk me through how that conversation went. I know like at your level it's probably very intuitive, but I think even just hearing the story, there's a lot of things that people could pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot, right? Like most of the team I have at MaryRuth, I think not all of them, but many of them are through referral, right? So at MaryRuth, I head up also like analytics, right? So um, I have 4 team members on the analytics team. Three are like one is like my head of analytics, and so her name's Julene. She actually got hired by someone else at the business before I took over analytics. But like when she was on my team, and she was like, "Hey Jay, we need to scale this. We need more people." I'm like, "Great. Like, who do you know that's going to be great?" And she's like, "Oh, I worked with this person, Nee, before at a different business, and she's amazing. I would bet my job on her." And I was like, "Great. Like, let me talk to her. She fit." And like, so her and then another person, like Julene, built her whole team based on people she previously worked with that she knew was killers. And I would argue that like MaryRuth has one of the greatest analytics teams that exists, mainly because like the first person I had was like very confident in building out the rest of the team. So I think like also like letting your managers or directors build a little bit of their team based on people they've worked with before that have been really great. That always helps. Um, I think in general though, I've been extremely lucky. I have a great team all around. Like I very rare I've had like a very bad hire that just didn't work out. I do think as an org, like at MaryRuth, like we learned a lot along the way. Where like, especially at the executive level, like sometimes we maybe went too pro in position, right? Where we're like a very unique business, and that doesn't always fit, right? Someone could do the job 30 years at P&G, might not be a fit at this business. And so like these days we're like a lot more tight knit. I think the higher you go up, the slower you should hire, right? Again, like got to meet
Yeah.
them in person, got to spend some time with them, want their peers to spend some time with them. But yeah, MaryRuth, I've just been blessed at MaryRuth. The team is
Yeah.
great. So.
So, with a lot of your team, did you sort of promote your earliest hires from within all the way up into these senior roles, or did you hire those like more senior roles externally?
Yeah, I'm very big on promoting from within and growing people. Like
Okay.
for me, one of my number one passions is like I want to help employees grow. So most of my directors today did not start as a director or VP. They were like a just a specialist role, which is like a regular level role, I would say, or a manager, and they grew into director or VP. I think every single one
Mm-hmm.
at least got one promotion to their current sort of director plus title. So I
Interesting.
think for me, that's something I'm very passionate about. And even today, like I still want to grow those people. I run my teams with a unique framework I got from someone else, one of my mentors who's amazing. But I always run the team with like sprints, right? So like every quarter, I want to give my direct reports, usually leaders, like some heavy sprint that moves the business forward and also grows their career, right? So like an example last year would have been like get TikTok shops off the ground, right? And that's something that Catalina, who led that initiative, like she learned that skill. It obviously helped the business and it's a great channel for us now, but like she could go work anywhere and stand up TikTok shops now, right? And so for me,
Yep.
like I'm always passionate about like if I can do something that grows the business and grows an employee, that's what you want to do for everyone. And so I've been trying to teach my sort of directors and VPs on like how they can roll that down to the team. But yeah, I think growing from within is like the number one way to, earn loyalty and also just like have a great team and a great culture. So
Yeah, I agree. I interviewed a CEO, I think 2 days ago, who said the exact same thing. They don't hire any VPs; they promote their directors to VPs. So
for sure.
that's the same thing. I also heard from one of my mentors that two of the biggest position changes that are hardest to adapt to are going from manager to director and then director to VP. And then they said going from VP to SVP or, some sort of C-suite's a lot easier. So I'd love to
For
like
sure.
understand from your experience grooming these managers, right? What are the common patterns where you've seen people fail as they start to go from manager to director?
Yeah, I mean the number one, like the hardest thing for anybody going from manager to director is like you got to get out of the weeds, right? Like a job
Mm-hmm.
you used to go in and when there's a problem you would fix it yourself. You now have to like teach people how to fix it, and ideally the next time it breaks they'll be able to fix it without you, right? So I think a lot of manager and director, the number one struggle is everyone like still wants to go solve the problems, right? And I'm very big
Yeah.
like you tell me your problem, I'm offering solutions right away, but like as you grow and sort of get into those higher roles, like you got to learn how to teach people to solve them. Um, I also think like you need to really figure out like At the manager level, I think most of it's about managing people, managing the business, but like just getting stuff done every day. Whereas a director, like that's when you have to start thinking about like how you grow the team, how you make them better. That's when you start to have like a little bit more of like future vision, I would say, right? Like what are we gonna need next? What's the next problem? Right? Like I think the higher you go up, you're not solving the problems of today, you're solving the problems of tomorrow, you know? And so, the higher your role, the farther out is the problem that you're solving. And so I think the manager to director is like the first time you really change from just like, we're doing what we need to do today, fixing what we need to do today, to, hey, this is what's going to happen next month. And, ultimately when we get to C-suite, it's like, this is what we're going to do next year or in 5 years or in 10 years, right? So I do think like that's the most challenging piece. And like, that's the thing you got to just help and coach managers and directors on like how to do.
Interesting. So I guess back when you were a director, right? Can you recall a conversation where you were helping groom a manager and they came to you for support, and maybe instead of solving their problem, you repeated it back to them where you're like, hey, like actually let me help you solve your problem, or was there a specific way you went about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my early director days, like I made this mistake a lot. Like I used to just be like, okay, great, let's go look at your problem and we'll
Yeah.
solve it together, right?
Mm,
And so it took me a long time to learn this skill, which was like, okay, I need to stop solving people's problem. I need to help them figure out how they can solve it, and then how they can figure out how to solve it in the future if something else breaks. Uh, so I can't recall like an exact conversation. I just know I
okay.
made
No,
the
no, no, no
mistake. I
worries.
made the mistake quite a bit where like I was just solving their problems for them instead of teaching
Yeah.
them how to solve them. I think over time though, I just realized like you can't scale like that, right? Eventually there's too many problems, especially for one person to solve, and like you need to teach people how to solve the problem. So uh, I
Well,
think
let's
it's
flip it.
important. Good.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
go.
say let's flip it around. Let's use myself as an example, right? Let's use the context of like, hey, I'm at Reacher, I'm at an early stage company, right? I'm head of go to market. It's a little different because it might not be as big as a director of like 100-person company, right? But let's say you're, I'm a manager coming, or someone's coming to me, right? They're like, hey, we're not bringing in sales into our pipeline, right? Our pipeline's dry, right? They're like a senior AE, right? I could go and like fix it. What should I say to them instead to help them fix that problem?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's still okay to help fix it once, right?
Okay,
But like you want them to have learned how to fix it in the future, right? So like, uh, you know, I'm not necessarily in the same space, so it's a little bit different. But like, if they're
okay,
having trouble, just like let's say it's filling the pipeline is the challenge
sure,
today, right? Like not getting enough incoming leads. Like for you, if you have multiple AEs, like you might talk about like what's working well for the other AEs. Or if you have like an all-star AE, you might have this AE talk with them and get with them on like what's helping those other AEs fill the pipeline. And can they learn anything from that to like bring that into their own pipeline? Maybe the other AEs are more active on LinkedIn, or they're going to more networking events. I don't know exactly the game, but you know, you might press them into their peers for their peers to help them grow a little bit. And then I think for you, it's just like if you see that they're struggling with any of those areas, like they're like, I tried to LinkedIn, but I couldn't figure it out. Like you might give them some thought starters, or you might give them some like, I don't know, coaching, or like, I don't want to say course, but like there might be like some courses, or
sure.
even like a custom
Curriculum.
GPT you can help them build that like they could
Yeah,
develop the skill a bit more, right? So like,
yeah.
I think options like that for sure.
No, I love that. I guess like, do you think the company's stage and size brings a certain amount of nuance into it? Because sometimes you have these, let's say like you're like pre-seed or seed stage and the company's small. You could have founder, director, VP, C-suite titles, but these people are also doing IC work and individual contributor work, and they're still building up the company, right? Is there a specific balance or I guess like striking a balance between the investment in these peers versus solving the business's problems and keeping it going where, there is a different perspective to consider?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? Like in the early days when you poach talent, like in order to poach them, you might have to give them like a little bit more fancy title, but ultimately they might be doing, they might be a VP doing some manager level work. Like it happens all the
Yeah.
time. As long as you have players that don't mind that, I think that's fine.
Hmm.
But over time, like for those roles to do what they're supposed to do, or like what their title describes, you don't really want like a director or a VP to be in the day to day weeds. But I think in the early days, definitely fine. Like when you're a startup and you got 8 people, like everyone's doing everything, whether you're the
Yeah.
CEO or the manager, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I am curious for that second transition, right? what do you feel like are like the pivotal moments getting a director into a VP, and what are a lot of directors missing to be a good VP at that level?
I mean, I think VP usually, yeah, at MaryRuth we don't have a lot, but I think people who grew from director to VP, it's more about taking on more responsibilities, right? So they're a great, an example might be like they're a great director of paid media. A director of paid media might become like a VP of marketing. So like they were really good at being a director of paid media and having future vision for that part of the org. But now they have future vision for like paid media, but also influencers, but also CRM,
Mm.
right? And so like for me, VP means similar to a director, you're just doing future vision for a bit more orgs at once. And then also again trying to help develop the directors for each of those, different silos of that marketing function and making them better, right? So now I do think VP becomes even more of a teaching role, right? Directors like teaching people how to solve their own problems and having a little bit of future vision, like what are we going to do next week? But the VP really needs to think like, what are we going to do next month? And how do you get directors to like teach their team or like be better coaches to those, more junior players for sure.
And what do you think directors miss as they start to go from like more short term opportunistic thinking to thinking long term? Because one of my mentors, would tell me he's like for example, let's say I'm allocating a budget for hiring for a startup, right? We're thinking about our runway, and we're thinking about all these other things, but he's telling me like, a director would think about getting an early hire on who can be a generalist across the business, which you can invest into and get a 3x return rather than get like a 1 to 1 or 1.5 to 2x return by hiring in someone senior who's very specialized in a certain area, right? So for me, that's one thing where I'm just like, oh, like I didn't even think about that. I'm not even thinking that long term in there. Like, are there specific like principles or things that you use to help directors get out of their box and think more long term like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an old saying, but everyone overestimates like what they can do in a day, but underestimates what they can do in a year, right? And so, like, I think
Mm-hmm.
you got to coach them a little bit on like what's the middle ground, right? Because I do think like every director for their P&L to look good will hire just junior employees, and like they will miss out
Mm.
on some pros in position. But I am very much like more leaned in on a hire junior, train them up type of model than I am hiring like expensive pro in position, right? I think there's a unique balance though. And I think like if you're the top guy or pretty senior, like it's your job to have a little bit of like knowledge and understanding of like what that is, right? Like, there's some roles like finance or operations or retail where like you want to hire pros in position because it's like a very unique position that requires a certain level of knowledge and skill. Whereas there's some things like TikTok shops where there is no pro in position. It only existed for 2 years, like you can't hire for it. So I think it's like the most senior person's job to like understand the nuance of that and then coach down on the directors. I think every director is going to lean into junior, and I think that's okay. You want to be more heavy-handed on junior because it's easy if the role doesn't work out. It's also easy to scale someone up and like give them more responsibility if they're really great and it's really working out, right? It's always easier to add responsibilities to like a great player than it is to like figure out what to do with a player that's not doing so great. So
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, there's not as big of an opportunity cost there in terms of salary. Um, I mean, with
for
that
sure.
in mind, like, what did the early days of forming TikTok Shop team at Mary Roots look like? I think one thing that you guys are famous for is just not outsourcing. I meet with so
Yes.
many brands who are like, we have a bajillion different types of creator agencies, live agencies, short form agencies, right? But even through our conversations, you're like, I want to do it in house. We're gonna do it the right way. I want this person to have context on the business, right? So I'd love to understand early days and how you scaled up.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like an look. There's some great agencies out there. Some I really love. I'm notoriously anti-agency. I think for a lot of agencies, we're like they're doing the work, like, and this is no disrespect to them, but like the business model is just least amount of work for most amount of money. And so like for the
Yep.
partnership to really work, it's just very hard to find like a great partnership that works for both. Software is a little bit different because it's a little bit more plug into your ecosystem. So I'm at MaryRuth, we did almost everything in house. Um, I think for me, TikTok Shop is very unique. Most of the company, including myself, actually, at the very early days, did not have a lot of faith in it, right? Like I didn't know what it could be. It seemed kind of dicey. I wasn't sure, like, you could hold up like your value proposition or pricing on the platform. It was actually David who had hired me. He was the one who was like very bullish on it. He could see that's an example of like the most senior person having crazy future vision where he was like, hey, this is the future. And my job generally at the company has always been like, how do I take hey, this is going to be a gajillion dollars and like also reality and put them somewhere in the middle. And so like I had went to almost every direct report I had, all my directors, and I was like, hey, do you want to take on TikTok Shops? I was like, try to figure it out. And every single director actually turned me down. They were all like, nah, I'm not interested. I got a lot on the plate, Jay. We're doing great. And so I had to go a tier down actually to my managers. And I was like, hey, I'm going to steal some of your, I'm going to find a manager from you guys and I'm going to steal them to do TikTok Shops. And so I had found Catalina actually, who I know you know. And I was just like, hey, I've got this new thing. Catalina was doing email and SMS. She didn't do any e-com channels, didn't know anything about it. I'm like, hey, I got this new channel, TikTok Shops. I want you to figure it out. I'm going to give you this crazy incentive if you get these crazy high sales. And she went and she did it. I think the first month in January 2024, we did like 50K. Then in February, it was like 200 or 300K. Then by March, it was 600K. And then, I think by May, we're doing 4 million plus on the platform, right? Like she sat down, she figured it out. And like, as she went, she's like, hey, Jay, like it's going well, but I need another person, or I need this, or I need that. And she was like, just kind of good at like figuring it out and seeing what resources she need. And, ultimately that led for her to become like a senior director at the company because she was okay doing something that was totally outside her job responsibility and just figuring it out. So
Yeah. And one thing about her that, I really love is that she is so big on automation, systems, and efficiency. Like she knows exactly how to make things very, very clear and trim out the fat from all these processes, right? Is,
for
is
sure.
that something you noticed when you were looking at her as a manager, or was that a skill you helped her lean into and cultivate as part of your coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we're just very big on at MaryRuth in general is like we just like to keep it simple. We always say winners win. For us, that means like a lot of different things, but we always keep our focus on stuff that's winning, right? Whether that's like our top products or like this strategy or whatever. Like we try to stay hyper focused on things that are winning. There's 1,000 things you could do. You could run
Yeah.
TikTok with retainers with creators with commission. You could buy CPMs. You could do all these. You pick one that you see the green light. MaryRuth always says this, but like you just go where the green lights are. And like as soon as we see a green light, we're like, okay, we're doing commission-based partnerships and it's really going. We just try to 10x it, And I think Catalina's like really good at like she's one of the people on the team. I think that's just been great at like adopting that culture. And so like she's very big on she wants to keep it simple. So we automate what we can, we make SOPs for what we can, and we just try to do as much of it as we can. So
Interesting. And so, like, what did the kind of next hires look like, and how did the team start to build out to like that 4 or 5 people mark? Was there anything different in how you guys managed or approached TikTok shops there?
yeah, so the org is bigger, even before TikTok shops existed. So like supply chain gets to be handled by supply chain. That's like a really easy
Got it.
plugin for us. The ads, which these days is only GMV Max, could just be handled by my ad guys, which is really great. And so most of TikTok is like almost influencer community manager. We call it community
Sure.
management. And so the next hires, and I will say like we got extremely blessed, but we got a few community coordinators or managers, I would say. We have one at MaryRuth, Carl. She's just like the absolute greatest. Like she just does great work with creators. She treats them so well. She's just a great person. And so we hired those junior roles first because that's like the most cumbersome thing for Catalina was like responding to every creator, especially as you like grew
Yeah.
bigger. And then, again, in traditional, referral fashion, like I asked Catalina, like, hey, do we know anybody who would be great, like a TikTok manager, right? Someone who can solve the day to day. And, Catalina knew someone from her previous agency who we brought on and great part of the team, still there today at the team. So like, that's it. I think we really have only about 4 people on TikTok shops today at
Yeah.
MaryRuth. So yeah.
Interesting, because it's funny you say community manager is the role you hired because every single agency and brand I'm talking to is like, how do I get my community manager on? I don't know if
Yeah.
you're hearing them
Yeah.
ask you that too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we started like, I would say like community coordinator, right? Because there's a lot of
Yeah, of
messaging, less
course, of
managing.
course.
But I do think like that's the most important role. And it does require like a certain personality, right? Like you have to
Yeah,
be okay with, creators sometimes being, it's very similar to customer service where like creators are not always happy with you. You have to solve some problems. You have to walk some people through things. You have to be patient. You have to be kind. It does take like a unique personality, and the person has to be ready. And at MaryRuth, I think we just got extremely lucky. Like Carl was absolute greatest at
yeah.
it. So
Well, it's interesting because I think with community management, a lot of people are like, yeah, they should be good at relationships, they should be hospitable, but I think there's also like a level of like personality overlap with like sales hires that I feel like community managers have. I was talking to one of my friends who has a collective of creators, and she was like, "Oh, by the way I validated community growth was I measured the incremental ROAS of creatives generated for my community against the ROAS generated for my creative team for ads, and then I gave a bonus to my community managers. Do you find that like those types of tactics or hiring people who get excited by that versus just relationships are better community managers than others, or
I think you can go either way. It's one of
yeah,
those, thousand roads to Rome. I think you could go more of like a sale. I don't want to say salesy, but like a more of a traditional
monetization?
salesperson
Yeah,
mentality versus like just more of like a community taking care of people mentality. I think at MaryRuth we're just very like MaryRuth is just big about taking care of people herself, and like so
yeah,
I think we've adopted a little bit of that, less salesy. But I do think like you could heavily incentivize great community coordinators with like how well they take care of the creators and then how well those creators do. I think is like a fine and great strategy for sure.
so with all these different ways to go about hiring community coordinators, what are like common patterns that you notice between really good community coordinators or managers, early on during interview processes?
Uh, During interview is tough. I mean, again, I think the number one skill to have is patience, right? Like you really got to be patient. I think bubbly's not the right word, but just like how sociable they are, right? Like, do they have a lot to say? Are they, willing to talk? Can they talk about stuff they don't know about? I think that's something to know, right? Because like again, creators are going to ask them a ton of questions.
Yep.
They have to be able to keep the creator calm, be patient with them, and then also be kind to them. Like Carl, she does a great job. Like we didn't give her an SOP for this, but like she sends like inspiring messages to the creators all the time. She sends them like, "Oh, I saw your video; it was really great." Like I think
Yep.
like she just really cares about the community. So like you want to find someone who's a bit passionate, a bit caring, a bit kind, a bit patient. I think like that's like those are like the key functions for this type of role
Yep.
for sure.
And I know you said it's like super tough to judge during the interview process. Do you typically set up like a work trial where you get like tons of community coordinators in and you have managers and directors monitoring their messages? Like what's a day brand or what's a way brands should go about setting up a test to like judge empathy in these kinds of hires?
I mean, again, I think this one is you got to go a little bit gut, and then on your 90-day
Yeah.
probation, you got to see like how well do they do, how good are they taking care of people. But I think like when you have a culture that's like a certain way, like your directors and managers also start to get a little bit of that gut feeling faster than you would think, right? Like as the team grows,
Interesting.
like
Yeah.
Alexis, who's now the TikTok shop manager, like she could tell you if someone's going to be, as kind and patient as Carl, just by like spending some time with them, right? And so like you can get a
Yeah.
good read. But we also do a couple rounds of interviews, right? Like we have a great HR team. They do like a first screening. They're very good at seeing like is someone pretty empathetic and will they be a good culture fit? And then the hiring manager will do something. And then a lot of times like a VP or myself might hop in and do an interview. And I think between three people, you usually get at least a good initial test. And look, if someone slips through and it doesn't work, that's why you have the 90-day probationary period to just make sure it's a fit for everyone. So
Interesting. Do you feel like for companies that are more early stage, right? Let's say it's a D2C brand setting up their like using TikTok Shop as a large proponent of their growth strategy, right? And they're hiring someone to own community as a whole. Do you think there's any differences in how you're interviewing them or things they're thinking about beyond just a community coordinator sort of skill set?
you're saying for someone to manage sort of the whole TikTok
Yeah,
ecosystem.
let's say they're like a head of community, right? And people are trying to build like an influencer affiliate head of community to use TikTok Shop. Maybe it also spills over into Instagram, right? Is that sort of like or do the characteristics more or less line up, or do they need a blend of that sales and coordinator skill
Yeah, I
set?
think that's when you need a blend of the sales, right? Because then you're getting into, TikTok Shop is like a very unique platform, but like you're getting into a little bit more like traditional influencer management, right? And like there is like an intersection where the community building and then just like managing influencers sort of cross together. And I would say on the influencer side, it's a lot more salesy, right? Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
pitching, there's a lot of like monetary competition. So like I think there is like a blend there over time for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like when you guys started, the ecosystem looks like completely different, right? Do you think like the community hires are the right hires that people should be making at this point in time, or are you noticing other differences in the strategy in the ecosystem that maybe people should focus more on analytics hires, or maybe people should focus on like advertising hires to like boost GMV max? Like, would love your take there.
Yeah, no, I think the game is just like it was, and people are overcomplicating it now. So I do think
Ah,
community manager, community coordinator is the first role to hire. I don't think you need an ads
interesting.
guy because you shouldn't spend money on ads until you have a sizable enough community. That's my opinion. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, look, the analytics are nice, but I think in the early days, it's just did you give out more samples today than you gave out yesterday, and did you get more videos today than you gave yesterday? You can track
Yeah.
that yourself in Google Sheets if you need to, right? So like, I do think like in the early days, it's almost for me. I think the only hire that's important is the community manager, and then as TikTok Shop scales, it's about the ads, it's about the analytics, even the merchandising. But in the early days, it's all community.
So do you think is that why everyone's reactively adding on the community manager as like a later stage role now across their orgs, or why do you
Yeah, I
think
mean, I
people
think a
miss
lot of
that?
people are just trying to run, especially brands who don't know, maybe they're just trying to run the traditional playbook, right? Which is if you're on Amazon or you're trying to grow your Shopify site through Meta, like you get a paid ads guy as like your first hire because it's like, oh, we can drive traffic, we can make sales. But I think the uniqueness of TikTok Shops is like until you have enough volume of content, your GMV max campaigns will never be successful, no matter how good your ad guy is, because the game is 3% how good are you at buying the ads, 97% how good you are getting content and what is the quality of the
Yep.
content, right? So like it's just a different game. I think people are just trying to apply like an old model that just doesn't work for this channel specifically. It's very much about the community. It's how much are you reaching out? How much are you A/B testing your message? If you're using a bot to reach out to creators, like how good is your initial message? How many samples are you approving? What's your follow-up message? Like it's all about that, and that's all community manager role. So
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like people like the instinct for marketers is to optimize the marketing system to get a better like CAC to LTV. Like that's how people's brains are wired. But you're saying like the inputs really matter more because the exponential return on good quality inputs from your community is worth a lot more than getting a better ROAS from your ad campaign, right? For TikTok
100%.
Shop.
For TikTok Shop
Yeah,
specifically, yeah. And it also it's a
interesting.
little bit the quality is highly important, but the quantity is also important on TikTok Shop,
Yeah.
right? The algorithm has such a short attention span. You need a
Yep.
certain amount of content coming in before the system will even do anything for you, right? So
Hmm. Interesting. And I know you said earlier, like people are overcomplicating, like making up new playbooks that don't need to be made up,
yeah,
right? Do you feel like, over the next year with TikTok Shop, like this playbook is going to continue to work, or what do you sort of predict is going to be this success or leading indicators of success or strategies on TikTok?
yeah. I mean, I think it's twofold. I think TikTok is like just wrestling with like an existential crisis, which is like there's more and more brands coming to TikTok shops, but you can't
Hmm.
really serve more shop videos without your platform no longer being cool, right? Like people come to TikTok
Yeah.
shops to watch their favorite cat video, not to get sold something, right? And I
Yep.
think there was an era earlier this year where like they were serving too many shop videos, and like people were
Yep.
like, well, I don't want to be on TikTok right now, and so they got to figure out like what is the exact right amount of like serving a shop video versus serving a video people actually want to see, and like they have to
Interesting.
make that great. I don't know how they will. It's a tough challenge. If anyone can figure it out, certainly them. I think the other challenge is like people just not investing enough time in the core playbook, right? Like I probably this year I've done 50 interviews. Every time I say the same thing, but like when I tell people like, hey, you should A/B test your main the message that you send through whatever bot you're going to use. You're going to reach out to 1,000 creators today. Like you should A/B test your messages. People will be like, great. Like I tried 3 different messages. This one worked. I went with it. I think it's an Alex Hermosi saying, but like people really underestimate like how much more work some of the top guys are doing. Like at MaryRuth, for example, we tested like 102 first messages to creators until we landed on like what was the best message, right? And so like people are like, hey, we tested 3 messages. Like it's not enough, right? Like you still haven't done
Hmm.
like one of the first fundamentals enough to like really have it honed in. And so I think people just need to like you need to run the core playbook. Just got to like really invest in it. And then you also got to get a little creative, right? Like what kind of creators are you reaching out to? Are you like trying to DM them on Instagram or find their email, right? Like you can't just be like ran a bot, got some creators. Like that's the table stakes strategy now, right? So like you still got to think hard. It's not I do think it had a moment of get rich quick. I think I take that shot now. It takes some elbow grease. That's not going to work for most brands. So
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you jumping on today. Would love
of
to,
course,
end it on that good note, and thanks so much.
yeah. Thanks a lot.